Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Ladan Neurotech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today, our episode is actually one from a talk that I did along with Avery Bedows of the Substrate Group and JoJo Platt of Platt & Associates, both former guests. And we did this talk actually at the NYC Neuromod online conference, which took place during the COVID pandemic. So we wanted to share that with you, talking about basically the communication necessary in neurotech, why it's important to communicate and communicating effectively, what that can do for your career, and why that's even important during strange times like this COVID pandemic. So you could be listening now, during the pandemic, or in the future afterwards, but hopefully you'll be able to learn something. And we wanted to share this with you because, we thought it was very interesting. So enjoy. You guys are curious about communication and spreading your message in the neurotech field. So we've assembled the top 3 communicators of the neurotech field, and we're gonna teach you guys all about this. So it's 1:00. I think we can start, and so kind of introduction about this. We're gonna each talk a little bit about what we do, why we do what we do as well, and then we can have kind of an open discussion, between ourselves and the audience as well to see what, is most interesting for you guys. So basically, my name is Ladan. I run Neural Implant Media, and I have a podcast, Neural Implant Podcast. It's a great podcast. Everybody should listen. Avery and JoJo have been on, and those are actually some of the best episodes that they've been on. But before I talk about myself a little bit more, let's start with Avery, and you can describe yourself and do a quick presentation about who you are, what you do, and everything like this.
Awesome. Thank you, Ladan. For those of you who don't know Ladan actually played a fairly pivotal role in my entry into the neurotechnology world, but that's a story for another time. I think Ladan and JoJo both have some slides they're going to throw at you, but I'm just going to sit here in front of this window and chat, slightly backlit. I run a consultancy called The Substrate. Officially, it's the Substrate Group, but I like the Substrate better for branding purposes. And in order to, explain the Substrate, let me tell you a little bit about my kind of hodgepodge background. I think the first endeavor of note here was starting a VR company a while ago, which was too early then and would still be too early now. And we were trying to apply insights from the cognitive neuroscience literature to design 3D productivity tools and document formats that would form spatial memories in addition to exclusively semantic memories. And therefore, we hypothesized you would form more robust long-term memory of the information we all access in productivity settings that we would normally see, in a Word document or a PowerPoint. Totally wacky idea. It wound up being my first pass, really, at practicing and figuring out how to communicate complicated things in simple, compelling ways while still capturing the nuance. After startup, which I ended up shutting down for a number of reasons. And until quite recently, I wound up in venture capital focusing on exclusively neurotechnology. And for those of you here who have met me before, that's probably the capacity in which you knew me. During that work, I saw a huge distribution in storytelling quality across entrepreneurs and companies. And I saw the impact that had on everything ranging from, the success of a fundraise to the clarity of thinking to perceptions that other people would have about the company and I suppose the entrepreneur. And also in this capacity, I produced and continue to produce a neurotech podcast, although Ladan's was OG. And, perhaps due to our host's really awesome radio voice, my old boss, Doug, we got a ton of positive feedback, and people just really love hearing well-crafted conversations about topics that interest them and which are still novel to their ears. And also in this capacity as, VC and also individually, I've written a fair amount about neurotech. And that's actually how Ladan and I got to know each other. And as with podcasting, I've seen here again the kind of attention and impact and clarity wrought by good storytelling of a compelling technical concept. So when I was, in my VC capacity, I noticed that a lot of my conversations wound up focused on how the entrepreneur or a company was telling their story. I got a lot of good feedback on the quality of the insight and the input, although, granted, sampling bias. But, earlier this year, before all the madness hit, this all inspired me to take a leap and leave VC and start a consultancy focused on storytelling for Neurotech. To explain real quickly what this consultancy actually is, I think requires a framework of sorts. And I do it partially to explain what I do, but also because I think it's a really awesome way to explain how what I do relates to what Ladan does, relates to what JoJo does. So I'll let them talk about that. But the framework I use is story worlds, or really story world, storyline, storytelling. The story world, if we're in the context of a company, is just the set of all facts, events, the team, the data, the evidence, the technology, the market. It's just all the stuff of the business. Then once you have a particular audience member in mind, which is really JoJo's sweet spot, you craft a storyline. The storyline is just a relatively linear sequence of things plucked from the story world. It's the information you're going to convey. And finally, you need to realize that in some medium. If I'm working on it, it's probably going to be writing, but there's lots of media you could use to communicate something, ranging from audio to video to animations to physical experiences, 3D objects, demos, and so on and so forth. And so any storytelling, broadly process has these 3 steps. My real strength is that I'm really good at producing storylines, sort of working in this informational abstract domain. And if the medium we're using for the storytelling is writing, I'm a writer, and so I've got that covered. The thing is, though, in order to tell a good story, or in order to produce a good storyline, you need to understand the story world. You actually have to understand the business, the market, et cetera. And, which for Neurotech and communications, as Ladan said, the 3 of us on this call and probably a few others listening in are probably some of the most qualified people to do. So what I do at the Substrate is I come in, I learn about your story world, learn about your business, the aspects of the neuro market that you play in, and I work with you to manage the creation of your storylines, whether for fundraising broadly, for specific materials, for internal company direction, for content marketing. And then I manage the production of your storytelling. So I will personally, write memos for internal, external purposes. I'll make decks, I'll do articles, website copy, sometimes press releases, and so on. And if it's something I don't know how to do, of which there are many things, like, a 3D animated video, I work with really talented folks who know how to get it done. I think Ladan knows how to do 3D animation. And critically, I'm the primary point of contact with that external designer, because I understand enough about the business and I've got the knack for building storylines that I can be the one who works with this, really talented creation domain expert to actually produce a compelling piece of media that tells the story you want to tell. That is the Substrate. My website, substrate.com, currently points to my Medium neurotechnology blog, but my email is avery@thesubstrate.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I've also got a bajillion other active emails that are distributed across various friends of mine. So yeah, that's me, and that's what I'm up to at the Substrate. Please always feel free to ping me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then maybe you can write your email address in the chat as well. I think that's really good, because you have this kind of background in the VC world, in the venture-backed world, and so you've seen a lot of companies, you've seen a lot of people, and you're very well informed on what's good, what's bad, and then actually also how you guys think as well, and what's important to you. So I think that's really big. That's really important. I think that's a skill set that you're very lucky to have, and you might be unique in having, like very, very unique in having. So as some of you might know, I run Neural Implant Media, and this is a Neurotech media company. So a little bit about me: I'm a podcaster, videographer, and graphic designer. I'm the host of the Neural Implant podcast, which I hope that everybody's subscribed to. Really good podcast, if I say so myself. And I've had 80 plus Neurotech guests on, 40,000 total downloads, and the feedback has been really good. People really like it. People really like hearing about some of their Neurotech heroes or people they look up to talk about what they do in a little less formal way than you might see in a paper. And also I've produced many Neurotech videos, filmed conferences, panels, promotional videos, produced live streams, and actually what I've started doing as well is offering 3D animation, and this can better explain your products. So if you're interested in something like this, then, let me know and I can send you a lo-fi render of the proposed storyboard, and we can kind of help you explain your product a little bit better as well. The problem with traditional media and why you need somebody like Neurotech facing is traditional media doesn't understand the field. I don't know if you guys have ever been featured in a newspaper or on TV or something like this. It's great. It's fun, but it's also really aggravating because they get so many things wrong. And I remember being featured in one newspaper article, and it's just like, they were taking notes, and I saw them taking notes, but they completely messed everything up. They factually got everything wrong. So I don't know if you guys have had any experience with this. Please write it in the chat if you have. So if you have somebody that is Neurotech facing, then they know the field a little bit better, and that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen, but it's less likely to happen. And also designers, graphic designers, anything, filming and promotional videos. You'd have to teach the designers, the videographers, what is necessary, what's important, versus somebody coming in and, just knowing because they follow the field. They've been in the field for years. You kind of can cut down on explanations and really bring people up to speed. And then also, they don't really care about the field. You're just another customer to them. So for me, that's what I offer. That's what Neural Implant Media offers, is somebody who cares a little bit more and really wants to see the whole field as a whole succeed. So, I'm especially now offering location-independent media services because of Voldemort, that which will not be named, the reason we're doing this Zoom meeting. So I can offer, 3D animations, event live streams. I can help with that. And, also promote on the podcast. We can talk to each other on podcasts and get your ideas into hundreds of earballs and, get everybody kind of up to speed with what you're doing. So yeah, contact me at Ladan@neuralimplant.media. And, let me know. I'd love to work with you guys. But yeah, later on, we're going to get into why this is important, why good communication and marketing is so important. So JoJo, take it away.
Okay. So actually, I should probably start myself off with actually using Avery services, because as far as my kids can tell, their best understanding of what it is that I do is they call me a science pimp. So they basically just think, I take one scientist and put them together with an engineer. I'm a matchmaker. That makes me a science pimp. In reality, what I do is I help my clients create strategic partnerships, research collaborations. I help with market identification and development within Neurotech, leadership positioning. Been in the Neurotech field for about 10 years now. Kind of fell backwards into that, but have very much enjoyed it. I am not a scientist or an engineer, so let's take that into account with everything I say. I have, over the last 10 years, been able to grow my network in a pretty significant way, and it's concentrated almost exclusively on Neurotech. I get about 50,000 views of my content every week on average. Depends on whether I'm traveling for a conference or at home, or if there's a lull in some of the research publications, but that's sort of the average number. So I want to teach you how to do this. A lot of people are fearful of promoting their work because it feels too egocentric, and that's not generally a perception that a lot of scientists and engineers are comfortable with. So we're gonna kind of help ease you into that. Some of the channels that you can use, YouTube, yeah, maybe. Depends, like if you're working with Ladan and you have some great video content, that may be appropriate. Typically, not so much. Instagram, I leave that one for the hipsters. Facebook, I leave that one for my parents. Snapchat, I use that to spy on my kids. And I've really kind of honed in, just focused on LinkedIn and Twitter. So once you've selected whichever platform or platforms you're comfortable with, then obviously you're going to go in and start to create your network or grow your network. If you've already sort of reached out to everybody you went to grad school with and you've connected with, everybody in your lab, where do you go from there? Start with people whose work you admire. If you don't know them personally, I would encourage you to add a personal note. Let them know that you're not just trying to push up your numbers of your network or sort of pilfer their eyeballs from their audience by virtue of being connected with them. Make it a quality introduction and let them know that you're genuine in your request. So add a personal note with that outreach. Don't, like I said, friends, family, your best friend from kindergarten, those kids all belong over on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. So whoever you were friends with when you were an itty bitty baby, push them to the side. You can call them, you can text them. They don't belong in your Neurotech network. And then finally, this is an ongoing exercise, is the security of your network. It helps to maintain the integrity of your network if you curate it often. So it's inevitable that you'll get phished. So if you get a request from somebody that you don't know personally or don't know of them being active in the field of neurotech, what I do is I look at whatever common connections that they have. And if it's somebody I don't recognize, I insist on a certain level of common connections. And then I'll go in and I'll look at who they are, what they're working on. Are they legit in general, not some, hacker trying to take over the world. And then I'll also make sure that they are specific to neurotech. So I'm very adamant about cutting out, there are no life coaches, there are no realtors, no multi-level marketers, and they just kind of get the boot. I'm ruthless and I have no problem with that. The next thing you're going to want to do is find your voice. I personally tend to be pretty irreverent and cheeky. I'm very conversational. Because I'm not a scientist or an engineer, I'm not held to that standard, so you may not be comfortable with that. And then the other part of it is the value to you. It shouldn't be such a high cost of your time that it overrides the value of what you get out of your network. Your message is really should serve your purposes, whether that's elevating the visibility of your research or attracting a collaboration in the future, or if you're in a commercial endeavor, some of the commercial facing messaging that you want to accomplish. I personally spend about, on average, 2 hours a day on my network, whether it's cultivating it, feeding it, reviewing, reaching out to people, or responding to people who have reached out to me. So make sure your value is in line. What you invest in it is equitable to what you want to get out of it. And so now that you've done all those things and you're ready to actually be active at whatever level you choose, you certainly don't, I'm a ridiculously high volume every week. I certainly don't expect other people to achieve my level of volume, and it's probably not responsible for most other people. I accept myself. Things to post about. What are you interested in? What are you reading or learning, or what are you working on in your lab? Don't be afraid to post your accomplishments. If you have a paper out, post it. You've earned it. You've put the work in. That's not self-serving. That is recognition of your and your team's accomplishments. It's not bragging. Tag people who are relevant to the conversation. So if there are co-authors on a paper that you wrote, tag them, give them credit, and that also will increase your visibility. Don't tag people who don't have anything to do with it. So I frequently get people who will tag me just to try and get in front of my audience. I'll go in immediately. That's part of my curating and security part, is I will remove any references to me that are not relevant. And if I catch you doing it too many times, I'll just kick you out of my network altogether. Like I said, not afraid to be ruthless in that. And that's what preserves the integrity of my network. Ask for help. There's absolutely no problem in asking for help. You go to your mentors, you go to other PIs, you go to people that you know, and there's no reason why you can't do the same on your social media. So reach out to people. If you happen to know somebody who's got a lot of material science background, post direct message them if that's appropriate, or post it if you have a more broad question that a lot of other people might be interested in learning the answer to as well. And if you take, you got to give. So if somebody comes to you with a request for help, it's the honorable thing to do to reciprocate. I think we have a really great community of researchers, and I'd like to see that continue. I've been through a lot of startups that have gone from a small company to a huge enterprise, and the culture invariably changes. But I think if we're careful and if we stay connected, we can keep our sort of family feel even as we grow to include multiple other areas of science and technology. And as we get more attention from the media, we're all in this together. So
yeah, definitely, guys. Well, so Okay, so COVID's going on. Is it still important to do this? I mean, is this something that, should we stop messaging as much? Or is this like I don't know, an expense that should be at the back of the list, something that we should deprioritize? What do you guys think about this?
Well, that's a good question. I think you can look at it in philosophical and pragmatic terms. Like philosophically, I think for a few weeks and maybe even now to some extent, there's some degree of it being in bad taste to put something out there that's just totally superfluous. Not that we're talking about superfluous, but superfluous content on LinkedIn kind of disappeared for me for a month or so as people were pretty much exclusively posting about COVID related things. That's not going to last forever. That can't last forever. And in both philosophical and pragmatic terms, philosophically, it's like, look, I still have this life around me that I'm living. And this is, has always been true for humans. And so you may as well live the life that you can live to whatever extent you can live it in spite of the chaos and the just collective grief in the background. But pragmatically, it is to everyone's benefit, yourself most certainly not excluded, to continue business activities right now. It's this, paradox. The way that the economy long-term doesn't get destroyed is if people aren't fearful of the economy long-term being destroyed. I think that, was that another JFK quote? The only thing to fear is fear itself. But yeah, I don't know, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the way I kind of see it is, hey, everybody's in this forced lockdown, and use it to make yourself better and hit the ground running. Like when they put you back on the ground, you're doing that cartoon thing where your feet are spinning and you just hit the ground and you just go. So that's kind of the way I see it. How about you, JoJo?
I've seen two really interesting things come out of this so far. One is there were some massive layoffs not that long ago. Second Sight and SetPoint both laid off significant numbers of talented people. And so one of the things that I did in response to that was on my site, started just a COVID-centric job page, which was really just to help people and keep our group of really talented folks, keep them able to stay in neurotech, because they've spent a long time to develop this skill set. They're obviously of huge value, and so we want to keep them in the field. So if that means working in a non-traditional way, doing contract work or remote work or contract to hire, I wanted a place where people could think outside the box and leave the HR department off in the dust, because they tend to get in the way sometimes of actual progress. The other thing that I've seen, which is really interesting, it just came up last week, is we're a pretty creative group and we have a lot to offer, and things in neurotech aren't specific to just the disease states that we've always focused on. There are some applications that have potential impact for COVID-19. So I've seen some people just on the fly sort of form a coalition and put together a proposal for the government to say, hey, we're in neurotech. We've got this technology that we think can control this cytokine cascade. Sorry, not scientist. And that would have an impact on COVID-related diseases. Anyway, that rapid connection happens because we're all engaged already.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if there could be some proposals with a pulmonary bioelectronic medicine, which prevents inflammation or something like that, and they'd be just throwing stacks of money at you at that point, probably. I
mean, also though, there's a lot of new stuff coming out about potential neurological symptoms that are showing up in COVID-19, and so I mean that is literally home field.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Well, okay, so maybe for people that aren't in this field or wouldn't be able to, take advantage of it right now, what are some other tips? Like what should people be doing right now to plant some seeds for success later on?
Well, my first endeavor learning about neurotechnology was binge listening to 30 of Ladan's podcast episodes. So,
which is excessive, not recommended.
It is. I also would recommend doing it over the course of 5 days. If this is like hey, I want to learn about this, though, there is some kernel of truth to the idea of pick a source of content, because at this point there are a few of them that exist, and just plow through them.
Yeah, I think if you're not in a lab right now, and if you're hampered from doing work on whatever research projects you're working on, if you can't do it except in person, then yeah, read. I think there's a lot out there, and talk to other people. This conference this week has been great. I haven't been this mentally stimulated in my professional world since this all happened. So Neuromotic has been great for that.
How about maybe we can transfer to like normal times. Let's pretend it's normal times. What are some of the challenges in your work? What do you find that people should know about? Some tips or something like this that they should know about to make their lives more successful in neuromodulation.
Avery?
I was going to give this one to you. I would say I'm a pretty big proponent of understanding. This is always good advice, but it specifically applies to communication. I'm always a big proponent of understanding the bounds of your skills and just having an accurate appraisal of what you are and aren't good at. And in communications, there are people who you can throw a topic at them they know nothing about, and they will give you a 12-minute long soliloquy in perfect form, extemporaneously. There are people who can't do that. There are people who are super good with pre-prepared scripted things. There are people who just sound like robots when they talk from a script. And so because in any business function or any research function, I think as well, storytelling is totally critical. Having an understanding of what you're good at and what you're not good at primes you quite well to understand, to JoJo's point, where and when to go get mentorship.
I see that a lot too. And I think a lot of my connections start on the preclinical side. They work in academia. They have developed something that has the possibility of turning into a spin out, recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and admitting that even as the discoverer of a concept, that you may not be the best CEO. You might be a good CTO or a CSO. And if you're not in that position to be a leadership role or an executive role for a startup, there's nothing wrong with that. If your goal really is to get your discovery out and implement it among the patient population, just be honest. It's going to be harder to try and be a CEO and get pushed out 18 months later than it is to say, hey, I'm not the best person for this job. Let me identify somebody who is. We'll partner and we'll get further faster for less money and impact more lives more quickly.
Yeah.
And also, there's this component of being willing to learn. Even if you have a broad-based willingness to learn, it's hard to learn about things you don't know you need to learn. And so, to JoJo's point, it's very possible to come from academia and learn how things function in the business world. But it takes a little bit of time, and it takes the humility and an acknowledgement that, the business world comes with a different set of customs and communication protocols and knowledge sets that are presented differently and evaluated differently than in academia, but nonetheless are still valid within that environment. And so I think just having the humility to be willing to learn that is super crucial and gives you a lot of mobility.
I would actually add one more thing to that, which this time is particularly well suited for, which is we're all accustomed to talking to each other at a certain level of expertise and knowledge. It's an amazing skill to be able to take what you do and translate it to a lay audience. So if you can start to think about the work that you're doing and start to craft your message in a non-scientific, or craft it for a non-scientific or non-engineering audience so that you can tell your story to virtually anybody, that's going to take you a long way, whether that's in attracting money or attracting a CEO or attracting the right talent that you need down the field or talking to reporters. That's going to help you avoid getting, like Ladan did earlier, completely misunderstood in a story.
Maybe for every paper that you work on during the out of lab time right now, commit to also writing a blog post about the paper that you'll share around or post once the paper publishes. That brings it down 7 notches to a place where it could be, distributed amongst a broader group of people. Just an idea.
Yeah. To JoJo's point, I think a big part, the hardest part of this is kind of distilling down the ideas, the concept, and really simplifying it. That almost takes more work than, having a big long thing. So I think Avery can attest to that. But guys, I see Gaurav has a question. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to it. We promised a half hour, really fast, informative thing. How he's asking how to balance selling your business idea to get big funding or possibility of getting your idea into reality for betterment of society. Maybe we can just do a quick few seconds, 20 seconds, each of us, what we think about this. And then, unfortunately, we're going to have to go. We'll have to wait till the next online meeting to talk a little bit more.
I think the real hurdle in getting your idea into reality and out into deployment has more to do with the regulatory environment than it does the communication environment. Folks like you have here, we can adapt and help position and craft your message pretty rapidly. That's not the problem. If you're looking for speed, those road bumps are going to be on the regulatory and technology aspects. Unless you have something specific, and I also think, then we can message.
I also think the other angle of this is like balancing incentives. At least that's what I'm reading in this question. Truth of it is, if you're trying to bring any kind of medical technology to the market in most of the world, it requires some large organization around it. In the US, that's principally for-profit businesses, but there are nonprofits as well. And you can structure it like that. But you still need some kind of organization with lots of structure around it, and that inherently requires resources, and therefore you need a way to procure those resources. So in some sense, there is just sort of this trade-off you have to make between the ills induced by incentives and organizations with large sets of resources and your desire to bring a technology to market and actually help people.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you can always start on something. You can always start somewhere. You don't necessarily have to have a product that, you're selling and everything like this. You can start small and then, work your way up. So again, everything's a hammer for me, like promotional video, really get the idea out there, put together a pitch deck, really nail down on the business proposal, business plan, and everything like this. So guys, thank you so much for attending. This has been really good, really short and sweet, hopefully. And until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye.
See you guys.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.